Right, so that didn't take long, did it? Less than a day, in fact, for Israel to have apparently violated the ceasefire agreement that came into effect in the early hours of Wednesday morning Israel time. A 60-day truce, as it effectively is, not really a ceasefire, since it has a clock on it between Israel and Lebanon, during which time Israel is meant to withdraw completely from Southern Lebanon, as are Hezbollah, instructed to withdraw north of the Litani River. All in all, the whole deal is just a watered-down version of the UN resolution which has kept the peace of that border region since 2006. These are not the actions of a state interested in peace or a ceasefire, though. These are provocations, clearly. And suddenly we're all left thinking, so Netanyahu agreed to a ceasefire this time around, where he has flat refused to entertain the idea and scuppered measures to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza, yet it all amounts to the same thing, where his troops are still seemingly defying that ceasefire in Lebanon too, or they are just still following his orders, because his word when it comes to ceasefires is just utterly worthless. If that is the case, can there ever be a lasting peace in the region anywhere when you can never trust Netanyahu to keep his word? And with tensions running high still, it wouldn't take much to push matters over the edge once again. So let's break down what has happened, because I doubt you'll have heard a word of it in Western media. Right, so yesterday I did a video saying I didn't expect the ceasefire to last very long, didn't I? But for it to last less than a day, or to be violated at least in less than a day, within hours in fact by the IDF, was a lot faster than even I expected. It's like the ceasefire never began, never happened, like it doesn't matter to them. Like they don't count because they're so used to exceptions being made for them. It's a good job I'm not the I told you so sort. If this had been James O'Brien saying this, you'd never hear the end of it for days, would you? It can never last long enough, though, because Netanyahu cannot afford to upset his far-right coalition partners who will never agree to a permanent peace, and he's still hoping to get out of corruption charges by keeping his war going. So why wouldn't he keep this one going too? Even as he's due in court over that on the 2nd of next month. Yet within hours, Israel has attacked Hezbollah fighters, attacked journalists, and denied villagers permission to return south of their homes, to actually reach their homes, as the agreement allows, restricting movements completely against the terms of the ceasefire. The only thing Israel should be doing right now is leaving. I figured Israel would welcome some time to recover, because they have, in no uncertain terms, had their backsides kicked in Lebanon. Netanyahu's got a 60-day break passed in the Knesset. He made excuses that he wanted to focus on Iran as his reasoning for that. Israel's still expecting an Iranian retaliation for their last attack on Iran, of course, and yet some in the IDF at least have carried on in Lebanon like nothing has changed. Over the last 2 months of Israel's attempted invasion of Lebanon, more than 130 IDF soldiers have been killed and over 1,250 injured. Israeli losses include 59 Merkava tanks, 11 military bulldozers, 2 Humvees, 2 armoured vehicles, and 2 personnel carriers. 6 Hermes 450 drones have been shot down, as have 2 Hermes 900 drones and a quadcopter. And every single attempt to advance in the territory, occupy and seize land in southern Lebanon to establish a military buffer zone has failed. Israel attempted to move into the border towns of Kiam, where it was forced to retreat from 3 times, along with the towns of Enata, Talusa, Bint Jabil and Gaza. Attempts to advance in the west on the towns of Bayada and Shema turned the area into a graveyard for tanks, is how it's been put. And again Israel were forced to retreat. All in all, you'd think Israel, therefore, would take the break. They failed. They've had their backsides kicked. But apparently not. That town of Kiam, incidentally, the scene of 3 attempts to advance by Israel, is one of those areas where the ceasefire has seemingly not applied in the last 24 hours too. As part of the agreement, and showing that Lebanon at least are acting in good faith, the Lebanese armed forces deployed in Kiam in response to an Israeli attack within hours of the ceasefire commencing, have replaced Hezbollah there. One resident of the town was filming to upload to social media the state of the town, and he was walking past a Merkava tank as he was doing so. And unbeknownst to him, at the time, the tank was tracking his movements and aiming its gun at him as he walked along. Aside from people filming their lives, though, there was journalistic presence there too. The press, protected under international law in a war zone, as we all know, were, as we become used to, fired on by the IDF. The Cradle have footage capturing the injury of a photojournalist called Mohammed al-Zatari. He was wounded in that attack after a ceasefire came into force. And this wasn't even the first incident of the day that violated the ceasefire agreement either. That appears to have been the killing of several alleged Hezbollah operatives, along with the arrest and detention for interrogation of several Lebanese citizens, who it is also claimed are Hezbollah, because it isn't everything. We've become so used to that as a go-to catch-all excuse from the IDF, haven't we? But a ceasefire was in place. If Hezbollah were still south of the Litani River in violation of the ceasefire agreement, I'd point to Israel still being in southern Lebanon and raise them one by shooting at journalists and still killing people despite a ceasefire being in place. It's not as if Israel are even trying to hide these killings either, because they held a press statement about it and wheeled out our old friend Mr. Pointy, Daniel Hagari, to issue that statement. Anadolu Agency covered this, an excerpt reading: the Israeli army said Wednesday that it killed Hezbollah operatives and detained others in southern Lebanon despite a ceasefire agreement with Lebanon. The ceasefire deal took effect early Wednesday to end more than 14 months of fighting between the Israeli army and Hezbollah. The soldiers identified suspects who approached no-go zones, detained them, and fired warning shots. We also killed terrorists today, Israeli military spokesperson Daniel Hagari said during a press briefing at the Defense Ministry headquarters in Tel Aviv. He noted that Israeli warplanes are continuing to patrol Lebanese airspace, warning that any violation of the agreement will be met with fire. This morning, the ceasefire with Lebanon came into effect, Hagari said, emphasizing that the Israeli military's role is to enforce the agreement. Earlier in the day, 2 journalists were injured by Israeli army fire in the southern Lebanon town of Qiyam while covering the return of displaced civilians to the area, the state news agency NNA reported. Hagari said that Israeli forces killed Hezbollah operatives and arrested others in southern Lebanon without providing further details. Fighter jets, under the direction of the Intelligence Directorate, struck Hezbollah's largest precision-guided missile production site in Bakkah's Janta area, he added. The military spokesperson said that Israeli forces hit a compound for the Radwan unit, Hezbollah's elite military force, in the same area. You're supposed to be packing up and leaving, not killing more people, injuring journalists, covering people returning to their homes, making arrests, or patrolling with more planes. The return of people to their homes has had a very mixed welcome too. Where those who have made it back to their hometowns and villages, the sight before them has been shocking. People who have returned to places such as Sidon, Nabatea, and Tyre have found their homes so heavily bombed they don't recognise them anymore, that these places now look foreign to them. Yet these are among the more fortunate displaced people in that at least they've got there. Israel have been stopping them returning elsewhere, again in violation of the ceasefire agreement. Another example highlighted by Al-Akbar stated that Israeli forces fired shells towards the outskirts of the village of Odessay and fired bursts of gunfire towards the village of Markaba, and in Mays al-Jabal they fired shells towards the town centre to terrorise people returning home there. Orders from Netanyahu's office apparently instigated an overnight curfew on Lebanese people attempting to return home who had fled north of the Litani River, barred from trying to return to their homes. And in light of attacks on civilians, the Lebanese authorities have asked their own people not to enter towns and villages still occupied by Israeli forces for their own safety. As for Hezbollah, they remain quiet despite all these incidents so far, perhaps out of a desire not to be seen as the violators, knowing Western media would be all over that if they are the ones seen violating the ceasefire, as Israel get a free pass to do so anyway, as we're seeing once again. Yet again, it is foreign and independent media who are doing all the journalism here, so do, again, support your favourites so they can absolutely keep doing so and keep providing the stories for commentators like me to highlight them. Israel had taken the mick. In short, they've gone, look, Hezbollah, let's get them, and then claimed it is Hezbollah who have violated the agreement, despite them very much still being inside southern Lebanon and showing no signs of going. Where Israel have got 60 days to leave, however, it has not been made public if Hezbollah have any kind of a time frame to leave southern Lebanon. Such is the problem with the full text of the agreement not being made publicly available. Israel can make claims like this, and we can't necessarily call them out as false because we don't know all the facts. However, we also only have their word that these people are who they say they are, and given the arrest of a handful of civilians in one place doesn't excuse the harm to journalists, the terrorising of civilians returning home, or any of the other incidents that I've mentioned in this video, happening within hours of the ceasefire taking place at Israel's hands, it has made a joke anyway of this ceasefire, or truce, or whatever you want to call it. Israel are clearly not acting as honest brokers here, and nailing that on, as I was just finishing the writing of this, it was being reported that a raid by Israel on the Tebna area of southern Lebanon had just occurred. And so it continues, therefore. No shame, no remorse, no intention of stopping. Sanctions on Israel now. Frankly, it was a surprise the ceasefire ever got going, considering how close to collapse it always has been for several weeks. But perhaps in light of how seriously Israel clearly are not taking it anyway, perhaps that's a moot point in itself now. For more on that story, however, and how we got to this point, check out this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.